Welcome to this conversation with Péter Márki-Zay, the candidate for Prime Minister of Hungary. My name is Kleine-Brockhoff. I'm the director of GMF's Berlin office. With me today, my colleague Jörg Forbrig, who is the director for Central and Eastern Europe and a senior fellow here at GMF. We have 60 minutes for this conversation. We'll start and have the main piece as a panel. Please, as you follow us online, use the Q&A function to pose any questions you might have. My colleague Jörg Forbrig has an iPad. He will see it and will bring you into this conversation as is necessary, appropriate, and you would like to. Also, we have a very limited number of people in the room. Welcome to these guests as well. Now, Péter Márki-Zay, wonderful to have you here in Germany. You've been meeting leading politicians in this town, and wonderful to have you here at GMF. And I can say with some pride, with a lot of friends of Hungary. Yes. In this office and in our larger community. So on April 3rd, in your country, people will go to vote. You're the lead candidate for a coalition of a half a dozen opposition parties, ranging from the center left to further to the right, but united in opposing Fidesz and the current office holder, Mr. Orban. As we understand, the race is tight. The world is watching. We're all interested. By way of introducing you, I will just say a couple of sort of markers. Péter Márki-Zay is a relative novice in politics, and I say that as a compliment. He's a mayor of a town of not even 50,000.
Right, 44,000.
If that's correct. He ran as an independent to become mayor and beat the local Fidesz candidate, an economist by training, marketing expert, taught at university, studied history, by the way, also, spent quality time in the United States and Canada. And politically, I think your self-characterization is, and we'll get to that in a minute, is that you're pro-European and conservative as two of your marking points. So much for your mini profile. And since you're also here, and many people here, including in our community, will not know you well, so my first question is a little bit giving you the opportunity to introduce yourself to this audience politically. So let me ask you, what do we need to know about you as a politician? What is it that you would want to say about the politician in you? What is sort of the key, or let me ask, what's the most important principle that characterizes you as a politician?
Well, usually I say that we are smarter and we don't steal. That's the simplest definition that I gave to my constituents. So anti-corruption is very important, but also the expertise. As an economist, by trade, I'm also an electric engineer, by the way, and I also am the proud father of 7 kids. And I was the leader of the Catholic community in my own city. So that all these are very important. But I guess the honesty, decency is what is most important in politics. That you have to care about the people that you need to represent. Even as a mayor, of course, or as a representative in the parliament, if you act in their interest to develop the economy, help the community improve, take care of the needy people, this is your job, and not to stuff your pockets. That is the most important message now in Hungary. Unfortunately, Hungary has the most corrupt government in our history. In our 1,000-year history, we never had more corrupt government than we have now. So this is the issue. And everything else is a consequence of their corruption.
You mentioned Catholicism. Does that play a role in your self-definition?
Absolutely, yes. Strong.
Which?
Anti-corruption and Catholicism is the same. You know, we have a religion, and we also have these 10 commandments. One of them is don't steal. So that's, I think you cannot circumvent that. You cannot explain that. There's no other way of going around it. No, it's important.
Mr. Márki-Zay, maybe sort of following on that sort of personal track at the moment, you're sitting right under transatlantic in our logo. For your political efforts, what are you what are you drawing on? You have that experience in the US and Canada. Is there anything that you took with that informs your political efforts today?
Yes, a lot. I was actually also, the United States is a very Christian community, also a very caring and tolerant and welcoming community. I was representing my country. I was not even a citizen in the United States, but I was a member, a board member in a workforce development board. You know, the mayor and the county council chief, they asked me to represent the county as a capable economist, a local businessman, working for a business. I was an employee, of course, a manager. And you know, that experience in itself, how to develop the economy, how to represent the county in this cooperation, also gave me a lot of experience. And the other thing is that the whole culture in the United States, you know, volunteering, about 40% of Americans participate in some kind of a volunteer work. And I always thought it was something very American. And you know what, in our own community of 44,000, you know, we encouraged volunteering, and many people, elderly people, retired people too, you know, they participate in volunteering activity, picking up trash, for example. Every spring we go out, you know, around our city and we pick up the trash. But many other things, planting trees and many other things, and people are enthusiastic and people are supporting it. Also, you know, I'm the only politician in Hungary, and I'm very proud of that, but it's also coming from the state, who financed its campaign from micro donations. So I always ask for people's support, and people supported me financially from the very beginning. You know, the first envelope arrived to my mailbox before I even announced my candidacy. You know, somebody said, okay, here's, you know, go ahead, we support you. And never stopped me since then, in the last 4 years. And, you know, I was also the only one who submitted a total, transparent account of all subsidies that I was given, all donations, and all my expenditures. Nobody did this in Hungarian history before me. And I did it consistently 3 times. Every time after I finished the campaign, you know, all my ledgers are public, except for the names. Because unfortunately, in Hungary, people, yes, they transfer money. So if authorities want, they come and check it. So they will know, but I did not put it out, their names and the account numbers. You know, this was hidden. But the amount, the message, the dates, everything can be, it's transparent. So yes, many things is coming from actual American experience, and also my liberal view on the economy, how the economy can boom, how you can release innovation, how you can capitalize on innovation and competition. You know, this is something American, and I believe that we need a lot more of that. There is a research institute in Hungary, Corruption Research Institute. Just last week, you know, I received an analysis, and they analyzed how exposure to corruption, you know, single player competition, so there's no competition, open tenders versus closed tenders. So there's a few aspects that they measured. And when I became mayor, Hódmezővásárhely was on a scale of 0 to 1 at 0.6, but a few years earlier, it was also at 0.8. Extreme high corruption exposure in my city. Since I became mayor, we went down from 0.6 to 0.1. This is the lowest that anybody has seen in Hungary on this chart. Okay, so 0.6 down to 0.1. So hardly any. It's because we take care of, you know, and that's being a Christian, being a Catholic, being a decent man, being an honest politician. Most people think that most politicians are corrupt. We had to prove, and we have proven, that no, not all politicians are corrupt, that decent people can go into politics. And I believe this example is spreading in Hungary. There are more and more people who think alike.
You want to beat Viktor Orbán. Not an easy task for a number of reasons that we'll get into. What is your pitch to the Hungarian people? You mentioned one, anti-corruption. Is that enough to win, or what else do you tell your people at home why you need to be the next prime minister?
Now, anti-corruption is, I believe, the root issue. So corruption is the root cause. Why Orban is very motivated, so to say, to control legislation and jurisdiction, for example. An independent judiciary would mean a huge risk for Fidesz politicians to go to jail. So of course he's against it. Free media is also a huge risk for Orban, for losing elections, for being unpopular, because if all people would know about all the evil things that he has done, he would lose elections right away. So of course he's very intent on limiting free media in Hungary. So everything else is coming from he's getting rich, stealing money, stealing European and Hungarian taxpayers' money, and getting away with it, and staying in power indefinitely. That's Orban's plan. But it comes with other consequences. Hungary has become the second poorest nation in the European Union, with the highest number of poor people. So Bulgaria on average is poorer than Hungary, but Bulgaria has less poor people than Hungary. Hungary has 74% of our population living under the European poverty threshold. And there's no worse data in the European Union. This is the poorest. If you look at this, we have the highest number of poor people in the European Union. And that is the clear result of Orban's government. We also had the highest number of COVID deaths in the world in 2021. If you look at the whole COVID crisis, then we are number 4, but last year alone, Hungary lost the highest number of people per capita in the world. And it's also because, you know, Orban said that he would follow the Austrian example. Austria is our laboratory, Orban says. But you know what? Austria gave free tests to their people. Orban gave them free parking. So it's just how stupid this government is. Orban used the COVID crisis to get rich. He purchased respirators which were clearly not suitable for hospital use. But he got rich on that too. He was, just a sec, so he was paying, I believe, 30,000 euro more, wait a minute, 33,000, yeah, 50, no, it's 50,000, 50,000 euro more for each unit, for the same make and model from the same supplier than Slovenia. Slovenia had a huge corruption case from this. Orban, with paying 15,000 euro more for each unit, there was not even an investigation. So even the COVID crisis, Orban only used to get rich, to steal.
So I've understood the root causes, and that then percolates into all kinds of policy areas. Now, is there any policy areas where you find yourself in agreement?
Yes, a lot. I can tell you that too. So there's many good things. For example, many people are outraged about his anti-migration hate campaigns. I'm too. But the fence, I believe, is a good thing. So the border fence, border protection. And I believe the European Union, Orban suggested that Frontex should come and defend our borders. Frontex offered to come, and then Orban declined. It was his idea. And then he declined, of course, because he's smuggling in criminals. He smuggled in Gruevski. Internationally, what the criminals got asylum in Hungary. And he was smuggled across the southern borders with a government car. So, of course, Orban doesn't want Frontex to be there, but we do. We want the fence, we want Frontex, we want to defend European borders.
But explain the fence to me. You are visiting a country where building a fence at the border or in a country is not really popular.
No, it is popular. Oh, in Germany it's not, sorry. No, in Germany it's not.
In this country, building walls is not popular.
I know it has a bad connotation.
And it sort of has a bad rap.
Yes.
And you're basically sitting about 20 yards away from a former border. It's right outside here. So explain the advantages of a border and tell me why a border of that nature is not inhumane in your view.
So first of all, I don't think letting terrorists into European Union is humane. I don't think that. I think humane thing is to defend our people and defend everybody, for that matter, from being killed. And if you want to defend your population from being killed, to lose their loved ones in terrorist attacks, then you have to defend them. And there's absolutely unacceptable that the European Union was not doing everything in its power to defend our borders. Illegal migration is a plague. It's not acceptable. We know that Abdeslam, who killed 130 European people in France, was crossing Hungarian borders under Orban. Orban let in Abdeslam, who killed 130 people in Europe. So illegal migration is a risk.
So how do you think about legal migration, or what would be legal to you, and what would be a legal cause for even a refugee under your definition?
What I
because
think,
under Mr. Orban's definition, essentially nobody is.
no, that's not true. Orban is letting in criminals and terrorists legally. That's what Orban is doing. So I'm outraged at how many criminals and terrorists were let into Europe by Orban. Orban is a security risk. Orban is a traitor. Orban is a traitor of Europe. Orban is a traitor of Hungary. And we can go into that detail because it's important. I'm outraged that he's building from Hungarian money with Chinese loan, a Chinese railway with absolutely no Hungarian interest in it. I'm outraged that Orban let in the Europe, into the Schengen zone, actually, into Budapest, the Russian spy bank. It is a traitor. He was even contemplating a military exercise with China, being a NATO member. So he's a traitor, but let's go back to legal migration.
We'll get to the foreign policy consequences in a second.
So legal migration. Orban characterized Soros's article as Soros plan. According to this article, the then 500 million strong European Union should limit migration to 500,000 a year, which means that Hungary, which is a nation of 10 million, according to Orban's Soros plan, should accept no more than 10,000 migrants, right? 10,000. Okay, look at Orban's record. Just in 2019, Orban accepted 55,000 instead of 10,000. In 2020, he accepted 44,000, 4 times more than the Soros plan.
Yes, but Mr. Márki, what about you?
What I'm saying, it's very simple. I was a migrant myself. I was a landed immigrant in Canada. I had a green card. I became a Canadian citizen. I was a migrant, so I know what migration is. Nobody should tell me what migration is. And I think Europe must follow the same example as Canada did, as the United States did, many other countries. Canada is a great example. For example, Canada accepted 40,000. Orban accepted about 3,000 migrants, refugees per year before 2018. Canada accepted. It's a larger country, of course. They accepted about 40,000 refugees from Syria. But as opposed to Europe and Hungary, where Abdeslam came through the green borders of Hungary and killed 130 people, not since 9/11, North America has not, US not, and maybe Canada once accepted or experienced Islamist terrorism, but at least they defended the nation rather efficiently. And yet they accepted 40,000 migrants from Syria, but a staff of 500 worked on screening these refugees in Damascus, in Syria, not in Paris or Berlin. So they screened these refugees, they selected them, and they made sure that with humanitarian aid didn't come a risk of terrorism. And this is the important factor here. I myself, I became a Canadian citizen, like I said. I was not a refugee, I was a landed immigrant. And I had a very tough score. There was a screening before you could enter. And I believe this, everything that Canada did in this field is acceptable and supported by me.
Excellent.
So Márki-Zay, let me perhaps sort of broaden the scope of sort of policy fields a little bit. You're the lead candidate of a united opposition, which represents a very broad range, obviously, of positions. Now, within that united opposition, where are the strongest overlaps in sort of policy positions? What is the common program that will eventually emerge? But where are also the areas of strongest disagreement amongst those political forces that back you?
Well, first of all, let's speak about what we agree on, and this is that Hungary has to go back to state of the rule of law, democracy, market economy, and European integration. It dictates a different foreign policy, internal policies, of course, approach to open competition, handling of public resources, public funding, etc., and media freedom, is extremely important for us. And Orban has overruled all previous things. Orban has switched off all checks and balances in our previous constitution. Orban has occupied all entities, all legal bodies, down to the last school principals and hospital directors. Everybody is selected based on political loyalty and not professional competencies. So yes, there's a lot of things that we all agree on and that needs to be changed in Hungary. We want to be a loyal member of NATO and the European Union, just to say a few. We also all agree on border protection, for example. It's absolute consensus in the opposition. We also want to support and represent Hungarians living over the borders from Transylvania, for example, living in Transylvania. So, you know, there is a consensus on all these important issues. We also believe that environment is more important than Orban believes that it's not a communist humbug, that it's not something negligible. We also believe that the real utility bill reduction must be based on environmentally sustainable subsidies for reducing utility bills, insulation, building insulation, renewable energy production, replacing doors and windows, etc., etc. So there's a large scale, also that the Roma community needs not only representation in our parliament, which we support. I achieved that 3 Roma representatives will be in the parliament, one of them in the Jobbik party list, by the way. So that Jobbik is changing rapidly, and that they got rid of all fascists, they got rid of all Nazis, they got rid of all extremists in their ranks, and now they support the Roma candidate in their ranks in the parliament. So I believe we made a huge headway from 2018 in building a very honest, decent coalition of different ideologies, but the same goal, same European, Western Hungary, democratic rule of law, market economy, Hungary in Europe, inside Europe.
If I may follow up on this, I think we all understand that this is not just a change in government that Hungary is looking at potentially, but it's in many ways a regime change. It's a re-democratization of the country that's needed. What are the areas that you will need to address and how, in order to return Hungary to what it once was, a lighthouse of liberal democracy in Central Europe?
Yes. Well, first of all, we did not have enough checks and balances because Orban could circumvent that, switch them off, and derail democracy as he did after 2010. So we need a new constitution with sufficient checks and balances that it can never be switched off again. That's one thing. Also, media freedom, freedom of the press, very important that we have to return to such states. What is going on currently is unacceptable. Hate campaigns, fake news, propaganda is spread by state media. No critical voice is allowed. I was never invited, never even allowed to enter public media, although I am for now, almost half a year, the United Opposition's lead candidate. So, it's outrageous and unacceptable. We decided to join the Eurozone. We set a deadline of 5 years for that. We know that it takes a lot of preparation, improvement in our performance, lowering the deficit, budget deficit, and lowering state debt and inflation as well. So it will take time, but this is our goal, to introduce the euro in Hungary in 5 years. Also, there are some historical debts where the regime change was never really complete. For example, we will make all communist agent files public. This is something that has not happened for 30 years. I'm pretty sure that all government has used these files to blackmail certain politicians and certain people. We want transparency, not so that obviously very old people will be condemned and humiliated, but so that nobody can be blackmailed again with this. Transparency is very important, of course, and anti-corruption, of course. For me, that's the most important. We are currently a country of no consequence. Politicians can steal. There are, the independent media has revealed a lot of corruption cases. Even, sometimes foreign entities have discovered corruption, and there was no consequence in Hungary. And it cannot go on forever. It cannot go on ever at all. I mean, it has to be stopped.
But in order to do that, you will need a large majority in order to change constitutions. So there is a theory that that restoring democracy in Hungary is going to be difficult under current constitutional circumstances.
No, it will be impossible. It will be impossible.
Explain.
So Orban has built this very elaborate scheme, a very elaborate, sophisticated system. If you follow their rules, they can make a constitutional change tomorrow. Orban has done several constitutional change for one single person. Because first of all, there are too many details. I personally support a minimalist constitution. I like the United States Constitution, which is a very stable one for 200 years. We already had more changes in 9 years. We had 9 changes in the Constitution, sometimes for one single person. So this is ridiculous. This is a mockery. We need a real stable constitution, a minimalist constitution. It doesn't have to get quotes. In our constitution, first of all, it now says that Hungary's currency is forint. Why? We should change that for sure. And if we accept Orban's constitution and we will not have a 2/3 majority, then we cannot have the euro. So of course we need a new constitution. Also, this constitution states now that the father is a male and the mother is a female. Okay, why does the 5th grade elementary, 5th grade biology textbook has to be in the constitution? It's ridiculous. I mean, it is pitiful. So no, we need a new constitution, one that has checks and balances instead of biology textbook quotes. So yes, we need a new constitution. The current constitution, however, well, first of all, our suggestion is that we need a new constitution under a large-scale participation from the people. So it has to be. Current constitution has only been accepted by Fidesz. It's a single-party constitution. It is called a basic law, not even a constitution in its name. Mm-hmm. The constitution has to limit the power of the executive branch. It doesn't do that. It now gives more obligations to the people. This is not the aim of the constitution. Mm-hmm. So it's a total misunderstanding what we have now. But it's only serving Orban's interest. If tomorrow Orban wakes up, by the end of the day, he will have a constitutional change that will set the date for the next election in 130 years from now. What can you do? Legally, it will be absolutely perfect. He can do that. There's absolutely nothing to prevent Orban from doing that. He can put in the constitution that no one with a Canadian prior history or Canadian citizenship can become a prime minister in Hungary. He can do that.
Are we, Jörg, any questions on the domestic front, maybe from our listeners?
Sorry, just one sentence because it's important. So no, even according to his own constitution, basic law, his constitution, his basic law is unconstitutional. Because he said that anything that is there to build a exclusive power for someone is unconstitutional and invalid. So by his own word, his constitution is invalid. But we need a new constitution. We want this constitution to be broadly consulted. I want Fidesz's opinion in this too, not only 6 parties. We do represent all ideologies, all branches of Hungarian society, but we need Fidesz's participation too, and we need that constitution to be approved by a referendum. Thank you.
Well, the one sort of aspect that I think is reflected in some of the comments also is you're going into an election, you mentioned it yourself, where the playing field is not level. We're not even allowed to sort of appear on public television. What is the sort of strategy of your team, of the united opposition, in order to somewhat perhaps level this playing field, compensate for some of the disadvantages that are imposed to you, onto you by the incumbent government? And what kind of support is also needed from the outside in order to have that level playing field restored?
Well, okay, let's, yes, it's not level playing field, of course not. It's almost a mission impossible, but I believe in miracles. And yes, we need a miracle on April 3rd. It is a miracle in itself. It's a sign of the resilience of the Hungarian people that after 12 years of brainwashing, there are still about 50% of the people in Hungary who want a regime change. It's a fantastic starting point already. Solution is we need to work harder. We will not get into the state media. Orban will probably not be willing to have a public debate between the two of us. we force that, and even Fidesz supporters cannot explain why is Orban not willing to have this live debate. Is he a coward? Is he lying? And that will be discovered in a public debate. So that one is one thing that we press for sure. But we know that it's not his interest for sure. So it may not happen. We also know that Orban is legalizing a large-scale electoral fraud. He already legalized people taking pictures of their own vote. We know that Fidesz is forcing them, if they want to keep their job, for example, if they even if somebody is paying for their vote, you know, people have to take pictures of their ID cards and their vote, and that's how they can prove. That's the new chain voting scheme. Now it's more sophisticated, technical. We see many signs of that. Fidesz legalized this. Now it's allowed to take a picture of your vote. Previously it wasn't. Same thing with vote tourism. If you know, people can register into swing districts, large numbers in uninhabitable sheds in small villages. Are now 200 people registered into one address, and they are you know, crossing the Ukrainian border, the Romanian border. You know, they register into these districts and they cast their vote. Now it's totally legal. Previously, if they didn't live at their residence, so-called residence, you know, it was a crime. Not anymore. Fidesz changed the laws, so now it's all legalized, and we could go on and on. You know, I remember 4 years ago in my election, every single complaint that we filed was refused by the committee. Every single complaint from Fidesz against us was accepted. Every single one of them. Municipality elections 2 years ago, there was a nearby small city where the Fidesz mayor won by one single vote. They didn't count again the votes. They refused all complaints. It was a done deal, one single vote. There was another constituency where Fidesz lost by 14 votes. Okay, they recounted, and then there was a new election, which Fidesz lost by 2/3, but it's okay. Still, you see that there is authorities, the judiciary, everything is on Fidesz's side. We want, now we have, you know, had a fundraising campaign, and we have enough money. We cannot buy outdoor advertisement services because these companies were told not to sell us advertisement services. Fidesz has 10 times as many advertisement services. We cannot really compete on social media. That's the only free, of course, YouTube, Facebook, etc. You know, that's free. At least there, I won my first campaign on social media, to be honest with you. But Fidesz woke up. You know, they occupy this field as well. They have experts and they have a ton of money. They have unlimited resources. So my 12-year-old son cannot watch a cartoon without being interrupted every 3 minutes with political advertisements, hate campaigns, fake news against me. My son is watching me as, you know, somebody who wants to bring in migrants, wants to take away the pension from the elderly, wants to make healthcare payable. All these lies are spread because they have unlimited resources. They don't even screen, they don't even target the audience. They have enough money, so they don't care if 12-year-olds are watching political advertising.
You're describing the size of the miracle that is needed.
Yes.
You've described how you've been denied access to mass media. You've just described how you're being denied access to paid media. So what is your tactic to overcome this?
Well, dedicated work, people who work, activists. I met activists from Fidesz in my city this week, Monday. You know, we had lunch in a canteen, in a restaurant. So I went to them, I talked to them, I recognized that they were not from my city. They had this Fidesz jacket on them. And I asked, okay, where are you from? From Budapest. And they were very nice to me. So probably, I'm not sure if they are Fidesz supporters at all. They are paid people. So Fidesz has a lot of money, paid people. Also from Transylvania, they get young people to campaign them in Hungary, but they pay for their activists. We have enough activists, never enough. We need much more, of course, but our activists are all volunteers. So it's a very different approach, but it's all about work. You know, Sunday I was out visiting 2 villages. Monday I had in a small village, we had a forum. I was talking to people. We have to go to the people, have to talk to them. That's the only tool we have.
So the answer is grassroots.
Grassroots, that's the biggest tool that we have, but also we are working on social media. You know, we are preparing videos. We are, those advertisement campaigns. We have this migrant counter. So even those people who fearful of migrants, they have to recognize that Fidesz is the only one who's bringing in migrants in large numbers, so that even those who are fearful of migrants shouldn't vote for Fidesz. So, you know, you have to get, and you have to break through bubbles. There are these communication bubbles, you know, those people who believe Fidesz, you have to wake them up. You have to get some shocking message. Otherwise, you know, Fidesz will rule the country.
What about election monitoring? Are you, as a united opposition, organizing any partisan effort there? What about others from within the country? And obviously the big question about the OSCE and the mission.
OSCE is welcome, and we need a thorough monitoring, because I already told you that there are legalized ways of electoral fraud organized by Orban. And yes, our activists are also there to protect our freedom of free election. For example, one reason why I suggested last night, to Hungarians living in Berlin that they should return to Hungary for April 3rd and cast their vote there, because if they cast their vote here at the embassy, it will be transferred in a box. There will be no ballot counting here. There is no control. Whereas in Hungary, there's a huge development. We were working diligently, myself too, that we should have enough electoral monitors, activists from the opposition. We need 2 people in every voting district. In my city, for example, we have 51 districts. We need 102 volunteers who will be there, who will be tough, who will prevent electoral fraud at counting the votes, casting the votes, etc. And then when we have the result, we should have the document stating the result. And if we add the total, there can be no cheating in the addition either. Everybody remembers 4 years ago, there was a total shutdown, a blackout for about 3 hours, and then results came up, of course, favoring Fidesz. Also, we know that 4 years ago, out of the 10,000 voting districts, in 5,000, there was only Fidesz dedicated people, only. And the results were on average 5% higher for those districts than the national average. So anyway, we have organized, we already have more than 20,000 volunteers who signed up to monitor the elections in these voting districts. We need about 30,000, but we are on our way to get there.
Unless there are any more questions from the group pertaining to the domestic front, I would suggest we move on first to the European level and then to the international. So what's Europe to you?
It's our home. It's a community. I am a federalist in many sense. I believe that those, and I always quote the example of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. In 1867, 150 years ago, the Austro-Hungarian monarchy had a tighter integration than Europe has today. There was only a joint foreign ministry, defense ministry, and finance ministry 150 years ago, and Europe hasn't got that far today. So of course, I'm a big supporter of euro, the common currency, and also, we need to take care of finances jointly. I think it's a very important thing. Europe has to have its independence. I would also support its own revenue. For example, the European Union, independent revenue. So just to secure the well-functioning federal level in Europe. Same thing with defense. Absolutely. I think we have to act in unity always.
That's surely federalist.
Yes.
Common defense, common finance.
And common foreign policy.
And common foreign policy.
Yes.
Now, you'll be in stark contrast to many of your Central and Eastern European friends and partners around you on that very issue. What do you tell them?
And I will go one step further. We need the European FBI. We cannot approve, we cannot accept that thieves are taking European taxpayers' money, like Orban. It has to stop, and there is no European country that can be immune from an investigation if there is any crime against federal law, against European law, against European taxpayers.
What do you tell Central Eastern Europeans who are deeply skeptical of federalist ideas?
I deny that. 80% of Hungarians are supporting the European Union and European institutions. They trust their European institutions more than they trust Orban.
But being pro-European doesn't necessarily mean being federalist. So there's good Europeans in Central and Eastern Europe outside of Hungary who would claim to be pro-European, but they're certainly not federalists.
No, but by saying federalist, I don't think that Brussels, the EU, Brussels should interfere into internal matters, education, many things. Well, they can set standards, they can support it, etc., etc. But there are cultural matters, for example, should be left to the state. Subsidiary is one of the most important principles of Europe. Subsidiary means that every decision has to be made at the appropriate level, meaning that local levels, and this subsidiary is an important issue in Hungary because municipalities have lost a lot of their independence because Orban is centralizing. Orban is against centralization on the European level, but Orban is centralizing on Hungarian level. Orban is taking away our revenues, our independence, our authorities, our schools, our hospitals, everything. And I'm very much against it. So I don't think federal being that everything should be decided at federal level. No, everything should be decided at the appropriate level. But foreign policy is not something that Hódmezővásárhely, my city, should decide, or Orban should decide. Foreign policy is something that we must decide at the European level. Defense is also, now we have to have joint defense. It's not a matter, we cannot have armies against each other, that's ridiculous. We have to have a common defense. Each country, like United States, of course, have National Guard in every state. It doesn't mean that their defense policy is not a joint defense policy.
That would trigger a lot of changes if you were to be elected on the European policy level. The euro in 5 years is one of them. Give us some more of that agenda, because if you have that type of federalist vision, there's going to be a lot of policy changes. Which?
Well, first of all, Hungary has to do, and I'm speaking of Hungary, not Europe.
Yes,
course.
But on your
the
European agenda.
Exactly. So the first step should be joining the European Public Prosecutor's Office. That's the very first step. So yes, introduction of the euro is our plan in 5 years, but joining the Public Prosecutor's Office right away. We need every crime to be prosecuted because that's a crime against Hungarians and all Europeans. So that is very important. I think that's the most important, and being a loyal member of NATO and the EU also means that Orban shouldn't and should not have the authority to veto European stance on like defending religious minorities in China, or stepping up against the oppression of democracy in Hong Kong, or the South China Sea issue, or Tunisia, as I heard yesterday. There's quite a number of issues where Orban is misusing its power, his veto power, and I don't think it's acceptable.
So the idea of European strategic autonomy should be relatively close to your heart.
Absolutely. I believe that, again, being a member of a community also means that you cannot be a traitor. To me, Orban is a traitor of Europe. I told you, I can give you a number of examples, how he served Chinese interest, Russian interest against European interest, how he let in terrorists to Europe, to the Schengen zone. He gave visa, he gave settlement.
So the sentence that in this country we know well from Mr. Orban is the sentence from one of his speeches when he said, 20 years ago, Europe was our hope. Today, we are the hope of Europe. What do you say?
I don't know. Did Orban mean of letting in Russian spies to Europe or Islamist terrorists to Europe? Which was the hope of Europe? of this. Buying Sinopharm vaccines from China for twice the price that Senegal paid for the same vaccine, twice the price. So just imagine the scale of corruption. But this Sinopharm vaccine was not suitable, never recommended, never even tested for people over 60. Hungary gave it to 400,000 elderly people over 60. Clearly, it was not suitable. There's an internationally published English language medical review where they proved that 25% of people over 60 and 50% of people over 80 were not protected with Sinopharm against COVID. And this is a crime. It's a crime against humanity, if you want, a crime against people. How many thousands of people died in Hungary because of the maltreatment of COVID crisis by Orban? And that was only because he wanted to steal. So how does it make Europe more secure? How does it, what kind of a hope is Orban a thief, a traitor for Europe?
Under your policy, I imagine the Visegrad group will change.
Well, I hope it will change. And interestingly enough, Visegrad people all agree with the necessity of this change. Mr. Kaczynski may not hope, but I have actually, at the same time, been criticizing Kaczynski, but he's a Catholic. I'm a Catholic, so for me, that is a value. That is a positive thing. The most important thing that he doesn't steal, and that's a huge difference between Orban. You cannot name Orban and Kaczynski on the same level for ethical reasons. Kaczynski doesn't steal. Orban doesn't do anything else. So basically, for everything, Orban has no ideology. Kaczynski has an ideology. Anti-corruption being part of it, illiberalism might be another part of it. But also, Polish economy is booming. We see the PISA results, education results. Poland is competing with Scandinavians, improving year by year. Orban has destroyed the Hungarian education system. Our PISA results are deteriorating year by year. It's only going lower. So it hasn't improved under Orban. So there's a big difference between the two. For Orban, there is no ideology. Orban started his career as a communist in the communist youth movement. Then he was a liberal. He voted for same-sex couples' equal rights. He stated that as long as he's the president of Fidesz, Fidesz will always be a liberal party. He promised that. He was the vice president of the Liberal International. Then he became an anti-Putin, pro-European conservative that I supported. And now he's an anti-Euro, pro-Putin traitor of the European community. So no, he has no ideology. The only consistent ideology he has is corruption.
I understand all your rage about Mr. Orban. Let's get back to the Visegrad.
No, Visegrad is
under your leadership, Visegrad would change.
No, Visegrad has already changed because Babiš was removed from power, another corrupt leader, of course. And Slovakia also elected new leaders. So 2 of the 4 countries already changed governments. Now, hopefully, Hungary can do the same. And, you know, I have the support of Mr. Tusk in Poland. And he's also a conservative, a member and a former, well, a president, of course, sorry, the leader of the European People's Party. And, you know, he is, of course, intent on changing government in Poland as well. So together, we believe that these 4 countries can work together. I would even, you know, grant larger involvement for Romania into this regional cooperation. We can also enlarge this group if we want to. But anyway, I think regional cooperation is a good thing, and that we have the same interests regionally as at European level, and this is not serving Putin against our own interests.
Mr. Márki-Zay, let's perhaps step out for a moment from the Visegrad group and look east. That's obviously the topic of the last days and weeks, and certainly also the coming weeks and months. How do you see your government changing its approaches to Russia, but also Ukraine? Because the current government we have seen has been cozying up to Moscow, has put obstacles in the way of closer cooperation with Ukraine. Broadly, how would you characterize the shifts that you see as necessary under your leadership?
Ukraine, we stand by Ukraine's closer integration with Europe and cooperation with NATO, but territorial integrity is important. Also, we believe that this is in the interest of the Hungarian minority living in Ukraine, and we will always support their rights for their culture, their language, etc. It does not interfere and should not interfere with our foreign policy, of course. It should always work together. And I believe, yes, by supporting Ukraine, we also support Hungarians living in Ukraine. Russia is a very different issue. We also believe that it's a great nation with a huge culture and a great potential. So, of course, we will continue to maintain a very friendly relationship and economic and cultural cooperation with Russia, but always on a mutual interest. So we will not betray Hungarian and European interests in favor of Putin. That's important. This is what Orban has been doing. Even when they purchased gas, for example, the Hungarian national companies had a loss on this trade, and Orban's friends had a huge profit. But the Hungarian company was buying the gas at the interconnector. You know, the Austrian side, they paid more for the gas than they were selling on the Hungarian side. So the Hungarian state company has suffered a loss, while Orban's friends, a private company, was making a huge profit. So this is also being a traitor. I mean, what kind of a crime is it? But same thing with Russia. You know, Orban extradited Russian criminals, anti-leaders, apprehended following the US given lead in Budapest, and then they were extradited to Russia instead of the US. The Russian spy bank, the International Investment Bank, was granted diplomatic immunity by Orban. So he allowed, Russian spies to operate in European soil.
Let me drill a little deeper on that, because the discussion that we also have in this country. What do you think can be done about weaning off Hungary of the dependencies that it has created over the last 10 years on a country like Russia, whether it's nuclear plant, the gas deals, the investment bank? I mean, what of those are reversible perhaps, or can at least be reduced?
No, reversible and reducible for sure, both of them, absolutely. If Hungary will become not only a democracy, but also a loyal member of NATO and the European Union, then this subservient approach to Putin will be stopped immediately. It doesn't mean that there will be no cooperation on energy front, for example. Of course, Hungary is also dependent, like Germany, is also dependent on Russian gas, for example. And yes, we also know how to reduce this dependency. There was this, all these LNG terminals, etc. It doesn't stop the energy issue being one of the most important European discourse today. But of course, and also, by the way, energy efficiency and reducing energy consumption is a great way of improving our independence. Orban has not done that at all. His energy policies were clearly wrong and not sustainable for this reason. But at the same time, we have to state that, first of all, Orban is a traitor, like I said, and it has given the Russians a lot of access to Europe. And that's why he's not only a traitor of Hungary, he's also a traitor of Europe. But at the same time, we also see the disappointment on Putin's face when he met a few weeks ago with Orban. Putin expressed his desire that Hungary will refuse NATO troops on its soil, that Hungary should not have the sovereignty of making a decision on how to defend itself. Orban, instead of protesting loudly and clearly against this interference with our sovereignty, he went to meet with Putin in Moscow. He entered into bilateral talks, which he should never have done in this situation. He even lied about that being a peacekeeping mission. But ridiculous, of course. These are not peace talks. Clearly, Putin wanted Orban's support against Ukraine. And Putin was very disappointed because, and that's reassuring for all of us Europeans, that although Orban let in the spies from Russia into Europe and granted the nuclear power plant tender to Rosatom without a public tender, and many other issues, he's representing Russian interests. But at the same time, just remember, he never vetoed sanctions against Russia in the Council. And apparently he will not veto sanctions against Russia concerning the Ukrainian crisis either.
Yeah.
So he did not cross that line. Yes, you know, he's pressured from both sides, but you could see on Putin's face and Putin's behavior, they were sitting at this long table to two opposite ends. And then when they had this press conference, Putin just left saying "Spasiba, Viktor," and then exited the room, leaving Orban there, humiliated. This is because Putin was not happy with Orban's answer, very clearly. And like I said, it's because Orban, being a traitor, he did not go too far, and he will not go that far as vetoing these sanctions. That's my assessment.
You mentioned China, the
Yes.
train
University, Fudan University.
University, 16+1. Tell me your view on this emerging relationship with it and as an important economic partner, but also we have just seen the, let me call it the Olympic declaration of a new world order between Messieurs Xi and Putin. Give us your view.
Well, again, same thing as with Russia. I can tell you that, and even more like that, probably. You know, China is one of the most important entities in the world. It's an economic powerhouse. We all rely on Chinese products in all of our pockets. All these gadgets are made in China, no doubt about that. So China is a great nation, huge economy, a great partner, no doubt about that. It doesn't mean that we cannot express certain criticism concerning, you know, the treatment of religious minorities or Hong Kong or democracy, etc., etc. And I think we need to be a loyal member of the European Union when we treat these issues jointly, not separately. Of course, Hungary doesn't have to act alone, but we have to go along with the European stance on these issues. What is even more concerning for me is corruption again, and again, betraying Hungarian interest. The Chinese railway that Orban is building between Belgrade and Budapest, Orban didn't even have a say in the route. There's two routes, potential routes. One is bypassing all Hungarian population centers, Szeged and Kecskemét on the route. It has no Hungarian interest at all, zero. You know, they calculated that this investment will return in 974 years. So since the foundation of our nation by St. Stephen in 1000, you know, this would have returned by now if they started building this railroad 1000 years ago. So it's ridiculous in itself. It doesn't serve any Hungarian interest. The only thing is that Orban is paid off by being given a part of this, a chunk of this business. That's all. But it's a betrayer of our interest. The Chinese university Fudan was given to be given more subsidy from the Hungarian taxpayers than all Hungarian universities combined. Just imagine that. What kind of a betrayal is that? You know, if Germany would be given a Chinese university, an elitist university, more money than all German universities combined.
It did not go unnoticed that happened in Hungary at the same time that Central European University was pushed out of the country.
The best university in Hungary and Central Europe was ousted, and they were operating in Hungary for free for the taxpayers. It was not subsidized by the taxpayers. And now we are subsidizing a Chinese communist university instead with Hungarian taxpayers' money. So I believe that this relationship is very similar to what Mike Pompeo has described over a year ago, when he said that corrupt oligarchs, corrupt dictators are influenced by China to further Chinese interest against their own nation's interest. But I also have learned from an example of Chinese business in Malaysia when they built a port facilities were built, and when the corrupt former prime minister was let go, the new leader of Malaysia renegotiated this deal, and all of a sudden the project became 30% cheaper. And instead of Chinese workers, Malaysian local workers were participating in the construction. So I believe there is always an opportunity to renegotiate even existing contracts with China and make it worthwhile for Hungarian taxpayers as well.
As we have to come to a close, let's get to final.
Perhaps the last question in this conversation, taking us back to the to the transatlantic platform that we also are. We spoke about Russia and China, the EU, regional cooperation. What are your sort of thoughts and also your vision, perhaps, for reinforcing the transatlantic ties of Hungary that have been going up and down for a number of years, and where there's certainly also work to be done, and that obviously relates back to your personal experience on that other side of the Atlantic. What are your thoughts, how Hungary can be sort of bolstered in that community?
You see, that we already discussed most points, so I can only repeat myself when saying that we will be a loyal member of NATO and a loyal member of the European Community, EU. It is in our best interest to develop along with these nations, and that everybody can keep its own culture, can maintain their own identity. No doubt about that, and we need to do that. Europe is a home for all these different nations, including minorities, by the way. It's also, by the way, in the interest of the Hungarian minorities living in neighboring countries, and also the Hungarian diaspora living elsewhere in Europe, that Hungary will be a proud and developing nation within the European Union. No doubt about that. But at the same time, it's also our interest that the whole community will become stronger, more independent, and a developing technologically and culturally developing region. We are also competing on the world stage with other regions, of course. It is in our interest to stick together and as a group develop economically and culturally both.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Márki-Zay, thank you for sharing your vision for your country and for us together in Europe, and as a transatlantic community with us and our audience on the screens. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank our GMF team for putting this on. Peter Schütte, Aleftina Sniher, Anne-Kathrin Runge, Annika Reinfurt, and of course, Daniel Hegedüsch. There will be a press conference following this. If you are on the screen, please leave this meeting. Please sign onto the meeting link that was sent to you in the invitation. We will leave the stage and leave it to you and your team to do your work with press. Again, I thank you for being here.
I think you did. Thank you very much. Thank you.